to, in one way or another, silence Harry and Meghan, because otherwise these attacks from California.
What do you make, Tom, of these accusations that Harry is using his children to, well, as a weapon, I guess, against his family?
That's very much my motive. I tried to find out the truth. And it was only by finding so many different aspects.
Tom Bower just said something that has the internet absolutely losing it. And this isn't coming from some random blogger chasing clicks. This is a man who's built his entire career on investigating powerful people who don't want their secrets exposed. So when he starts raising questions about Harry and Meghan's children, people pay attention. Because suddenly, things that should be straightforward facts about a family somehow feel like a carefully guarded mystery. If you don't know who Tom Bower is, let me fill you in. This guy isn't throwing around opinions for entertainment value. He's an investigative author who's made a career out of revealing what powerful figures try desperately to keep hidden. His track record speaks for itself. Years ago, he wrote a best-selling book about Prince Charles that became a #1 hit, not because it was royal gossip, but because it was thoroughly researched. Documented truth about how Charles rebuilt his reputation after Diana's death, and how Camilla had to do the same. When Bower says something, it usually sticks because he's done the homework that backs it up. What makes him especially credible is his method. He doesn't just rely on anonymous sources or palace whispers. He goes directly to people who know his subjects personally, and he doesn't stop until he gets answers. When he started researching Meghan's background for his book, he reached out to dozens of her friends trying to get their perspective. Most of them completely ignored him. Why? Because Meghan apparently made it very clear that nobody should cooperate with him. One of the few people who would talk was her father, and even he said that despite everything that's happened, she's still family. That's the kind of resistance Bower deals with regularly, and it's exactly what motivates him. He's drawn to uncovering what people are desperately trying to keep buried. Now he's focused on something that honestly has a lot of people confused. The circumstances surrounding these births go way beyond normal privacy, even for royals who tend to be guarded. And it's not just Bower noticing these inconsistencies anymore. People online have been connecting dots for years, and the more they look, the less things seem to fit together properly. Let's talk about what allegedly happened with these birth announcements, because this is where things start getting genuinely strange. According to multiple sources that Bower has cited, the birth announcements that went out to the public contained information that was completely fabricated. We're not talking about small details being slightly off. We're talking about major information that didn't line up with what actually occurred. And here's what makes it even more bizarre. Buckingham Palace apparently backed up information that wasn't entirely accurate. Think about that for a second. The palace, which is usually extremely careful about official statements, reportedly verified details that didn't match reality. The plan was never to use Portland Hospital in the first place. That's the traditional location where royal babies are born, where generations of royal children have entered the world. But Meghan reportedly wanted a home birth instead. Nothing inherently wrong with that choice. Plenty of people prefer home births for various reasons, but then why announce Portland at all? Why create this entire narrative around a hospital birth that supposedly never happened? And it wasn't just the location that didn't match up. Even the official statements released by the palace contained details that later turned out to be inaccurate. The entire description of what happened at Portland Hospital, the one shared with media outlets and the public, apparently wasn't what actually went down. You might think maybe they just changed their minds at the last minute. Maybe there were unexpected complications or privacy concerns that altered the plan. But here's the issue with that explanation. Nobody said anything afterward. There was no clarification, no correction, no acknowledgement that things went differently than initially shared. Just silence. And that silence is precisely what's making people wonder what else might not be adding up. Tom Bower has been vocal about this situation, pointing out that the public wasn't given accurate information about birth dates and times. When you examine the timeline, it's difficult to argue with his observations. Dates don't match up properly. Announcements came at odd times. Details that should be straightforward somehow became murky and unclear. What's striking is how much effort appears to have gone into controlling the narrative around something that, for most families, even royal ones, is relatively straightforward. You have a baby, you announce it, people celebrate. But with Archie's birth especially, every single detail felt managed, curated, and deliberately vague. Now you might be wondering why any of this actually matters. Who cares about birth details, right? Well, when it comes to royal families, lineage isn't just a family tree curiosity. It determines titles, succession rights, and where people stand within the institutional structure. That's been the system for generations. This isn't about being dramatic or making mountains out of molehills. It's literally how the royal system has always functioned. If there were arrangements made around these births that weren't disclosed to the public or even to other members of the royal family, then titles, inheritance rights, and official positions within the monarchy could all be affected. These aren't trivial details. They have real implications. Then there's the photo situation, which adds another layer to this mystery. For children who are supposedly being raised in California away from royal constraints, there's been remarkably little visual documentation of their existence. And when photos do appear, they're so carefully controlled that it raises more questions than it answers. Take Lilibet's 4th birthday post that Meghan shared on Instagram. Even in that personal moment, celebrating her daughter's birthday, you couldn't see the child's face clearly. The whole thing read more like a carefully crafted brand post than a mother spontaneously sharing a sweet moment. People picked up on that immediately. When everything is this controlled, when nothing ever seems spontaneous or unfiltered, people naturally start wondering what's not being shown. It's human nature. We're wired to notice when patterns don't match up, when situations appear overly managed rather than genuine. In this case, the level of control over every image, every detail, every piece of information has been so extreme that it's creating more suspicion than if they'd just been more open from the beginning. So how are Harry and Meghan dealing with all this scrutiny? Not well, from what sources are reporting. Harry in particular appears to be really struggling. Reports coming out of Montecito paint a tense picture. He's allegedly watching every headline, monitoring every comment, every video breakdown, every theory that pops up online, and it's clearly taking a toll. People close to him describe someone who's pacing constantly, not sleeping well, showing obvious signs of serious stress. He's apparently snapping at people around him, which isn't characteristic of his normal behavior. And think about the irony here. This is the same person who's been incredibly vocal about mental health, who's encouraged people to be open about their struggles. Now he finds himself caught in exactly the kind of spiral he's warned others about. Meghan's handling it differently. From what's being reported, she's taking a much more tactical, legal approach. Cease and desist letters are going out. Legal teams are working behind the scenes. It's all very controlled, strategic, calculated moves aimed at shutting conversations down. But this approach might actually be backfiring, because the harder they try to suppress the conversation, the more determined people become to investigate further. Every legal letter that goes out fuels more interest, more digging, more people asking why they're going to such extraordinary lengths if there's nothing to address. Meanwhile, old friends are quietly creating distance. People who used to be in Harry's inner circle, guys from his military days who stuck by him through difficult times, are apparently stepping back now. They're not making public statements or anything dramatic, but the support network that used to be there is thinning out. That's got to add to the isolation he's probably already feeling. Those around him say he's emotionally all over the place, angry one moment, completely withdrawn the next. He's built his entire sense of self around being a father, around protecting his kids, around building this new life. And now when that core part of his identity gets challenged, what does he have left to hold on to? That perfect fairy tale narrative they've been trying to sell, the one about escaping royal constraints to build something authentic and free. It's crumbling under the weight of all these unresolved questions. And the unfortunate part is so much of this could have been avoided. They had opportunities early on to address the confusion. When people first started noticing inconsistencies, when timelines began feeling off, when the secrecy seemed excessive, those were moments where clarity could have stopped this from growing into what it's become. A simple, straightforward explanation could have ended the speculation before it gained this much momentum. But instead, they chose silence. And now every day without addressing these issues just makes the situation worse. The quiet approach that maybe felt dignified at first now reads as defensive. The privacy that seemed reasonable back then now feels like something's being hidden. From a PR standpoint, this is catastrophic. Their entire public image was built on being relatable, authentic, breaking free from traditional royal stuffiness. But when you look at how controlled and secretive they've been about fundamental aspects of their story, that authenticity starts feeling manufactured. They really only have one clear path forward. Provide the clarity people are asking for. Share information, clear up the confusion, address the inconsistencies directly. Or continue with the quiet approach and the controlled narrative. One option might restore some credibility and put this to rest. The other guarantees the doubts never fully go away. And when it comes to royal lineage, these kinds of questions don't just fade with time. They linger, they get documented, they become part of the historical record. 20 years from now, people will still be discussing this because the core issues were never properly addressed. What's really unfortunate is how preventable all of this was. Transparency from the beginning would have avoided most of it. A willingness to engage with legitimate concerns instead of shutting down every conversation could have stopped the speculation from spiraling. But that's not what happened. And now we're all watching it unfold in real time, with Tom Bauer leading the charge in asking the questions that won't go away.